This article from SidePost is really interesting to me. I wanted to share it with you guys. They say a combination of severe depression and conspiratorial beliefs is strongly associated with support for the January 6th riot, study finds. Okay. I don't know why this... Okay, there we go. In a series of 2 studies, researchers examined the relationship between conspiracy beliefs and depression. Their findings indicate that depression is positively associated with conspiracy beliefs. Additionally, a combination of severe depression and conspiratorial beliefs was found to be strongly associated with support for political violence. Based on their results, the authors of the new research argue that reducing depression could substantially reduce support for political violence in the United States. Quote, the last several years in American politics have unfortunately introduced concern about political violence, said study author James N. Druckmann, the Payson S. Wild Professor of Political Science at Northwestern University and author of Experimental Thinking, a primer on social science experiments. At the same time, the pandemic exacerbated rates of depressive symptoms such that roughly 30% of the population reported such symptoms. We were interested in understanding whether there were conditions under which the two relate to one another, with a very strong conviction that any such relationship is conditional and nuanced. Put another way, we are very sensitive to not stigmatizing those who suffer from depression, Druckmann explained. We thus developed a theory that suggests the relationship depends on a conspiratorial thinking and or participatory disposition/efficacy. For their initial research published in Applied Cognitive Psychology, Druckmann and his colleagues analyzed 3 waves of data from the COVID States Project, a nationwide survey of behaviors and attitudes related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Their sample included 55,212 individuals from the United States. That's huge. The participants were asked to assess the accuracy of 3 prominent conspiracies related to the pandemic: that the coronavirus was created as a weapon in a Chinese lab, that COVID-19 vaccines contain the lung tissue of aborted fetuses, and that COVID-19 vaccines contain microchips that can track people. They also completed the Patient Health Questionnaire, a common screening tool used to assess depression in primary care settings. All right, so let me pause here to run through this a little bit. The lab leak theory is still, I think, a reasonable theory. I mean, there's still debate as to whether or not it came from the wet market or from a lab leak. I mean, there was a lab of virology in Wuhan and where they researched coronaviruses. So it's not crazy to say it came from the lab. I do think it's crazy to say, though, that it was used as a bioweapon on purpose by China, because they, a lot of their own people got infected too. They wouldn't want that, even if they're doing some sort of an attack. So I think the attack aspect of it is definitely conspiracy thinking and dead wrong. I think it's reasonable to debate whether it's the lab or the wet market. But then, like the microchip one, I think that one is truly a crazy conspiracy. I think that's like Looney Tunes type stuff. Even though a lot of conspiracies are true, right? Like Bill Gates literally worked to protect the patent rights of Big Pharma for these vaccines, making it so that hundreds of thousands or millions of people died because they couldn't get the vaccine. That's like an open conspiracy. It's an open conspiracy of capitalists to prioritize profit over people. But the microchip, that is like an untrue conspiracy. Anyway, they say, in line with previous research, Druckmann and his colleagues found several social and political variables that were associated with endorsement of the COVID-19 conspiracies. Evangelical Christians, Republicans, and conservatives were more likely to view the conspiracies as accurate, while women and older individuals were less likely to view the conspiracies as accurate. Interesting. The researchers also found a positive association between depression scores and conspiracy beliefs. In other words, those who experienced more depressive symptoms were more likely to view the COVID-19 conspiracies as accurate compared to those with fewer depressive symptoms. Okay, so here's a question I would have for these authors, though. Is there contention that there's more depression among evangelical Christians, Republicans, and conservatives? Because they're saying they're more likely to believe the conspiracies, and they're also saying the people who are depressed are more likely to view conspiracies as true, which would mean evangelicals, Republicans, and conservatives are more depressed. That, again, I'd like to ask them this question because I've read previous data that has suggested actually they're happier on average. And it could be because that old adage, ignorance is bliss, right? So if they're more ignorant and, they feel like a sky daddy's looking after me, maybe that comes with a certain amount of comfort. Would explain why a lot of people are religious. The researchers also found a positive association between depression scores and conspiracy beliefs. In other words, those who experience more depressive symptoms were more likely to view the COVID-19 COVID-19 conspiracies is accurate compared to those with fewer depressive symptoms. Interestingly, the association between depression and conspiracy beliefs was stronger among white participants, men, those with higher incomes, and those who were more educated. The association was also stronger among those who had COVID-19 personally or had someone diagnosed with COVID-19 in their household, having greater social support. In contrast, weakened the association between depression and conspiracy beliefs. So people who are more lonely are more likely to believe conspiracies. Overall, our results highlight substantial heterogeneities in the relationship between depression and conspiracy beliefs. The connection appears strong among those with more advanced status and among those who have challenging experiences and or lack of support in coping with such experiences. Okay, so if the takeaway is, using my own language here, if the takeaway is people who are more, lonely is not the right word. What word should I use? People who are more desperate tend to believe conspiracies more. Yeah, that seems very intuitively accurate. It's not usually the people who are really down the rabbit hole on conspiracies. You talk to them for 5 minutes and you're like, this person's like a little bit off. But again, it's more complex than that because some conspiracies are fucking true. Bay of Pigs, Operation Northwoods, the Tuskegee experiments, the JFK assassination, right? So I find this, in a sense, I find this study a little glib on that front, but I'm sure there's some truth to the claim that they're making. That, again, just to go back to the headline, because I think it sums it up well, a combination of severe depression and conspiratorial beliefs is strongly associated with support for the January 6th riot. So, you're more okay with political violence if you're depressed. You're more okay with political violence if you are deep in conspiracies. Yeah, I could totally see that. The messy part of this conversation is that there is no one clear answer, right? Some people would make the argument, and they did all the time back when there were a lot of Al-Qaeda attacks and ISIS attacks and stuff. A lot of people made the argument, look, these people are coming from places that are economically depressed. They have zero hope of a bright future. They find a brotherhood in other jihadist members who will support them. And so because of the geopolitical situation, maybe the U.S. killed their aunt or their brother in an airstrike, because of revenge, because of geopolitics and imperialist foreign policy, because of no economic opportunity, that is what pushed said person into violence. And there's some degree of that's true, right? If you read Osama bin Laden's letter to the U.S., he explains exactly why he did what he did, and a lot of it is geopolitical stuff, and, I'm against the imperialism of the big bad Americans and stuff like that. So that could be one reason to want to do these things. But then you also have, I think al-Zawahiri was a wealthy doctor from a wealthy family. Osama bin Laden himself was from a wealthy family. So with him, it wasn't about economic degradation and, lack of material well-being. And for them, you could say it's just more of an ideological concern. They're raised in a fundamentalist religious environment, and they really believe this stuff, and then they try to act that out in the world, right? So same thing for the people of January 6th. Some of the people who were there, their job was outsourced. They're fucking miserable. They have nothing going on, no hope for a brighter future, no social support. And so because of material consequences, there was a backlash, and they stormed the Capitol and committed crimes, right? That could be some people there. For other people there, and there was reporting on this, they were wealthy business owners, and they still stormed the Capitol. And so for them, it's not, hey, material well-being, because they are materially fine. So for them, it's more about maybe they went down the QAnon rabbit hole. They went down the Pizzagate rabbit hole. It was the conspiracies that, pushed them to do this, because they felt like, if this is true, I got to fight back. They're stealing the election for my guy, right? So to them, it's a logical thing to do. And then you also have the personal psychology angle of this, which is what this study is touching on, which is sometimes it's an individual pathology that leads somebody to do bad actions. So if you see the lone wolf, so to speak, mass shooter, who just, is sort of off mentally, that's an example of this, right? Severe depression, anxiety, in some instances, a paranoid schizophrenic episode, manic episode, that can lead to violence too. But as a general rule, yeah, the headline of this, I think it's interesting. I think there's some truth to it. Severe depression and conspiracy thinking could lead to political violence. Yeah. But again, it's a mix of any number of factors can lead any individual into doing political violence. And I think the most important takeaway here is you have to go on a case-by-case basis. With some people, it's going to be poverty, lack of economic opportunity. With some people, it's going to be purely ideological because they truly believe in some sort of fundamentalist religious goal or even some hardcore political end. With some people, it's going to be because of personal psychology like depression, mania, etc. And yeah, that's the gist of it. So interesting study. Take from it whatever you will. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.